Okay, and now I have to share my screen. Okay, can you see the disclaimer? Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So, the opinions expressed in the following webinar are those of the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the official policies or views of the Editors Association of Canada or its members. And Molly, you can now show your slideshow again.
Okay.
And so, Editors Canada is on and is grateful to work on treaty lands and territory of the Indigenous peoples, Inuit, First Nations, and Métis of what we now call Canada. We are all treaty people and accept our responsibility to honor all our relations. We encourage you to learn more about the Indigenous cultures, Indigenous territories, and effects of colonization in your region. As one example, as a settler descendant, I am increasing my knowledge by having taken the University of Alberta Free Indigenous Canada course. Editors Canada is excited to be co-hosting this webinar with Word on the Street Toronto. Welcome to all of those who have learned about the event through Word on the Street Toronto. Before we get started, I'd like to say a few words about Editors Canada. Editors Canada is Canada's largest professional association of editors. As an association, we support editors at all stages of their careers. If you're interested in learning more about editing as a career or about how a membership with Editors Canada could help you find work and develop skills, please email us at info@editors.ca. We're happy to help with your journey as an editor, even if this is your first step. And I will also include that email in the chat. And I see Lisa has a question. Yes, the recording will be available for viewing later. You should receive the recording in a few days. Okay. Another thing about Editors Canada. Editors Canada runs a professional training program which offers 30 to 90-minute long webinars starting at $27, through which editors, writers, and other communication professionals can learn new skills. Some of our most popular titles include The Future of Editing, Leaning into What AI Can't Do, Introduction to Editing Horror, Anti-Islamophobia Editing, Harness the Power of Neurodiversity to Maximize Your Potential as an Editor. We will also be hosting a conference-style virtual training day on October 28th with curated workshops and networking sessions meant to enhance your editing skills and keep you competitive in the current job market. To browse all of our titles and see our full training day schedule, please visit webinars.editors.ca. And I will also put that web link in the chat too. Okay. Now, I'm happy to introduce Molly Topple, our presenter today. Molly Topple came from the desert, and part of her is still there. Since leaving, though, she has studied literature, literary craft, philosophy, and emotion, and she earned an MA from New York University by talking in detail about how scary stories made her feel. She uses the things she learned to edit horror and sci-fi novels, and in doing so, helps readers and writers alike find solace in terror. No matter how much she edits, she still gets the heebie-jeebies. Today, Molly is presenting The Ground in the Clouds, an introduction to structural editing. Please go ahead, Molly.
All right. Thank you very much. I do absolutely still get the heebie-jeebies, and I think that this is going to be a fun time. So, getting started, we are going to. Uh, this is a webinar on what structural editing is, so we'll be starting with that. And then we'll be proceeding to cover subjects including what structural editors do, what kinds of structure we're talking about, what tools you would use in your work, what deliverables you hand to your clients, the rest of the job that's more than just the actual editing work, and how you might apply your pre-given specializations through the example of how I apply mine. So, getting started with structural editing here and what it is beyond the name, I am going to give a quote from Editors Canada. noted expert in the field. So, according to Editors Canada, structural editing is the assessing and shaping of overall organization and the content of the material to optimize it for the intended audience, medium, and purpose. So, my paraphrase of this is that we are reviewing high level, big picture elements of writing and providing recommendations for them to work as well as they can. And to some degree, we are also going to be making recommendations about whether certain elements of the writing are a good idea in the context of the larger piece, or in the context that it will eventually be published into. And that's structural editing. What a webinar. Maybe we can give you a little bit of extra time for your evening. But no, this is a full-time job that a lot of people have. So there is rather a lot more to it. The actual doing of structural editing relates to what our main job is as editors, which is not to be right. Our job is not to deliver correct edits. That is event, of course, like how we show that we have done our job, but like the main substance of the work is to understand what it is that we need to be doing. And that kind of understanding breaks down into a few lines. The first, and to me, the most important of these, is to understand what the author is trying to do, like what their goals are for the piece, what is important to them about it, why it's important, and how all of that importance is fed into the writing itself. Uh, in addition to what the author is trying to do, we have to also be able to understand what the readers want and expect out of the piece when they encounter it. But it's not just between the authors and the readers that we need to understand. We also need to understand third parties. Like there may be other people involved in the edit that we would need to satisfy, and we need to understand what they want as well. Most commonly, this is going to be publishers. However, publishers, of course, would want to sell a lot of copies to achieve a lot of awareness, but not just publishers. If you are, for example, doing a structural edit of a textbook, you would need to satisfy the school board. If you are, if the textbook is going to be published in the United States, I believe that my impression is that the Texas school board specifically is going to be doing most of the purchasing for the entire country. And so you would need to understand what their legislative requirements are to be able to accept a book, and then also what their history of accepting books is like, what kinds of things they have gone on to purchase and to relay, because you need to be able to understand the expectations from those previous purchases. Um, so how we actually gain that understanding, it comes from a few different sources. The best of which, the most ideal, is sometimes we just get told what we need to do our job, what we need to understand, and that is really, really nice. However, we don't always have direct access to the authors. And like, for example, if your client as a freelancer is a publishing house, then you might be working with the managing editor rather than with the authors themselves, and you might not be able to contact the authors. Even if you do have direct access to the authors, they might not be able to fully articulate what it is that we need to do our work. And so in that case, we have to read their minds. I mean, read the text, read it very closely. I do actually also mean read their minds, and I'm going to be getting to that much later in the presentation, so put a pin in that. But doing a close reading of the text is going to be the best way that we can understand what the text is trying to do, what the author is trying to do. And when we are working on that understanding, again, structural editing is big picture editing, but more than that, it is the editing of intent and intent's manifestation. When we are working with the structure of a piece, what we are working with is, again, what is the author trying to do? And when we are editing what the author is trying to do, when we are editing that intent, I am thinking about things like, can their intent be honed or altered to better meet the audience? And then when I'm thinking about like editing the audience's wants and expectations, I am thinking about can those wants and expectations be shaped to meet the writing? Those are like some very major considerations that I have during my read of the text and then during my suggestions and the actual crafting of edits that I go on to deliver towards the end of the project. And this is very, very intimate. Like when we are working with these wants, expectations, and intents, we're getting very, very close into the minds and like priorities of the different involved parties here. We are, as professionals, attending to what our authors care about, what readers care about, and that is absolutely an act of closeness, which I find to be one of the most rewarding parts of the jobs. But it is something to be aware of as you're getting into it. So I'm going to get into some standards, like professional standards for editing. These are developed by Editors Canada, and I will be going from content to organization to plain language. So starting with content, the to my mind, the main professional editorial standard is that as editors, we are to determine what content is suitable and optimal given the audience, medium, and purpose. Then we are to identify and either recommend or make appropriate deletions, such as to remove repetitive, irrelevant, or otherwise superfluous text or other elements, and additions, such as to fill gaps in content and strengthen transitions between sections. In both the text and the visual elements to make the entirety of the material suitable and optimal. So over and above that, what I am thinking of when I am working on the content is what is the author thinking about? When I am working with the text, what is it that they are thinking about that created these words? And then with that understanding, how do the big picture and the little picture resonate with each other? Do those details support the big picture? Does the big picture reflect the details? Those are sort of like my main considerations in addition to this over and above this standard for how I am approaching a structural edit. Then for organization, again, to my mind, the main standard is that we as editors are to reorganize material to achieve a coherent structure and sequence, a logical progression of ideas and a narrative or expository flow, and a shape appropriate to the audience, medium, and purpose. Keep in mind that the medium often determines organization, such as the inverted pyramid structure of a news story, the chapter arrangement of a book, the navigational structure of a website. If necessary and possible, create a new outline or sitemap and then either follow it or recommend that it be followed. And over and above this, what I am thinking about as I am thinking about like the editing of intent is how is the author thinking about this? Like they're thinking about something, but they are thinking about it with a direction. So what connections are they drawing as they are thinking through their subject matter, and how are they moving between those connections? This all adds up to what is the overall direction for the piece, and again, what is the author trying to do? Because our job is to help them to do it. And then finally, for the plain language section, the standard is when applying plain language principles in structural editing, do the following. Ensure that the document has the content that the readers need. Check that the content of the document is structured so that related information is together and ordered in a way that makes sense for the readers. Guide the readers to find information easily through such navigational aids as headings and heading levels, a table of contents, and bulleted or numbered lists. Make sure readers can locate, understand, and act on information, and consider when to use illustrations or media other than text. For content and organization, there are other editorial standards in addition. At the time of recording, this is the only standard for plain language. But how I sort of summarize this to myself when I am editing a document, a novel usually, is that I'm thinking about the piece itself. What is the reader going to want from this, and does the text fulfill that want? And that is the like plain language on the content side. On the organization side, the plain language consideration is, will the reader follow along with the author? Both of those are very much necessary as you are building a coherent, cohesive, and readable document. But more than that, because this is the standard that attends to the audience's response, the reader's response, there are also larger conversations that we need to be keeping in mind. And I'll go into a little bit more detail with this later. But as I am reading through a document, I'm also wondering, how does this fit into broader social context? Like, what is this? What world is this going to be published into? What conversations are currently happening that this is going to speak to? How is it going to contribute to and potentially change those conversations? That is absolutely part of my considerations as I am editing something at the structural level.
Hey,
So
Molly.
that, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Someone had a question about the previous slide before plain language, I believe.
Mhm.
So Hazel said, so you mentioned wants and expectations shaped to meet the writing. Does this also work the other way around?
Um, the yeah, like the writing would be shaped to meet the audience, and the audience's wants and expectations would also be shaped to meet the writing. Generally, what I mean by that is that like considerations for the reader's expectations are things that I'm going to be making while I am performing my edits. And so, like, I am going to want to make sure that the piece is speaking to the audience that it will receive, that it is in current conversation with the state of uh, whatever publishing niche it is going to be published into. But then also the shaping the audience's wants and expectations is generally best done through like really, really good transition work. If ideas are well transitioned between, then the audience is going to be more able to follow along with what the author is trying to do, and will be more amenable to that maybe not being exactly what they had wanted when they picked up the book, or what they had wanted or expected. Through that transition work, you can create a more receptive audience. I Let me know if there is more to your question that I did not address. Uh, so continuing on, and hopefully that was a decent and good answer for you. But moving on up until I hear that I need to go back, the actual like work of structural editing, there are three tools and three deliverables that I'm going to be talking about here. Huge caveat with this is that, again, I am an editor of fiction, specifically horror and specifically science fiction, and specifically novels within each of those. And so the tools and deliverables that I have are absolutely tailored to that. If you're going to be working in a different area with a different specialization, then you may need to adapt these tools and deliverables to better suit like what it is that you are doing. And I am hopeful that by providing these examples, I will give you something to springboard off of. But getting into it, the first of the tools that I use is an intake questionnaire. And this is something that I'm not always going to be able to use. Again, there are some situations in which I would not have direct access to the author of the piece. But when I do have that access, this is something that I use to just straight up ask them what their project is about. This is something that I can use to gain access to authorial intent prior to touching the book. And so I find it very useful for that purpose. Uh, Within the context of fiction, we are not going to be reading in the same way that we read for pleasure. And so don't worry about getting spoiled because like the considerations that we need to be bringing as editors include like, is this upcoming twist well crafted? Is it adequately foreshadowed? Uh, is the content of the twist actually like relevant to the story, or is it going to be coming out of nowhere? So for those kinds of reasons, I don't worry about spoilers. In fact, I've generally found that even when I am reading something for pleasure, uh, knowing about twists tends to increase my pleasure with the entirety of the thing because I'm better able to think about like the structure and craft earlier on in the piece and to appreciate the background work that is being brought to it. But however, that is like especially important when we are working as editors is to know and notice that structure and craft as early as possible. And so a few key points with the intake questionnaire are to find out what is important to the author about this project, why it is important to them, and how they reflect that importance in their writing. And also, the other side of this is that you may need to decide whether or not you actually want to work on this project that has now crossed your desk. Sometimes we encounter projects that we're just not suited for. Like they require different kinds of specializations and backgrounds than we currently have. And in those cases, it is best to know that prior to signing a contract and potentially be able to send them off to a more suitable editor. Sometimes there are also pieces that cross our desk that are not necessarily in line with our priorities either for our career going forward or for other priorities. And that also is very good to know. So I'm going to provide a few sample questions from my intake questionnaire. Again, this is oriented towards fiction. So first question is, what is the book's genre? And then what do you see as the strengths of that genre? What is the story's premise and hook? Can you summarize the main plot and subplots for me? Who are your ideal readers? Is there any abusive or traumatic content that I should know about before beginning my edit? What are the book's themes? Do you have a distilled artistic statement ready? Does this book require subject matter expertise? And how do you keep track of the details? And so, what I'm trying to do with these questions, over and above what I have already discussed, is that I'm trying to kind of get a sense of not only what the book is about, but also like where the author is in their career, what kinds of considerations they are bringing to their craft, and whether I should be expecting to provide more like fine grain kinds of suggestions, or if I'm also going to be generally mentoring them in the craft of fiction, which I do both. But this is sort of where I figure out kind of what the direction of my edit is going to be. The second tool that I use is extremely conceptual. It's very loosey goosey. It's categorization and flow. And so this is actually a little bit easier to talk about with nonfiction, where sometimes you're going to be only working on an outline. If like there are a lot of nonfiction books that are commissioned rather than being submitted to a publisher after they have written them. And in those cases, you might be like, especially if you're an in-house editor, you might be working with the outline prior to there being any text whatsoever and addressing any issues at this like very conceptual level without there being anything like more concrete to draw on. And so I'm going to provide an example here. It's an incomplete outline. It is the history of a pizza that I ate on Tuesday. So the first chapter is on chilling with my friend Bridget, with subsections pertinent video games and movies, a rough timeline of conversation, and the fridge and the things that aren't in it. Second chapter is on the economies of food delivery with subsections the restaurant business models and expected profit margins, careers across the ages, culinary theory, and veganism and fast food. Third chapter is on do you like olives? Now, this is a mess. This is absolutely a mess. It is all over the place. And because it is incomplete, you don't know what is actually important here yet. So as you are fixing it, um, this is not something that we would be able to fix right now. We would need to see a lot more of the outline. But as we are fixing it, the first thing that I would do would be to categorize the entries in the outline and then decide if there are any extraneous categories and rearrange the entries to maximize the flow and minimize the reader's effort in staying with the author. And then finally, to suggest deletions and additions to aid with coherence, completion, and resonance. Sometimes I might also suggest changes. With this one, I expect that there would be a lot of deletions, but that's like the very, very basics of how to edit an outline, and also the basics of like thinking about categorization and flow at this very abstract level.
I have
And
another
again, this
question.
is super
Sorry.
conceptual. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Victoria has a question. Do you let the author know before you go to contract that they require more of a mentorship role from you so they know to expect that? How do you express that?
So that's a very, very good question. When I am writing up a contract with an author, I am going to absolutely be discussing what levels of service I think that they need. For example, if they tell me that they are going to be seeking an agent and specifically seeking a boutique agency rather than a full service agency, boutique agencies often provide a lot of structural editing service as part of the agency service. And so I would not recommend that they contract with me for a full edit. I might say, like, this is my query package critique, so that you can go on to be more likely to receive interest when you are out on submission, and have better chances of receiving an agent. Uh, or I might say, like, this requires something a little bit more on the level of coaching, uh, and I would like to work with you to um, like more generally develop your skills, potentially prior to actually doing an edit. However, the other thing to consider here is that with the structural level specifically, this is the first level of editing. And so what I generally will assume is that people don't come to me unless they have taken their manuscript as far as they can on their own. And so sometimes the mentorship that I provide will be through an edit. Sometimes I will be providing a lot of like general writing advice when I am doing an edit, and I do always include a little bit, an hour or two follow up consultation after an edit. Sometimes I might leave, like, remind authors gently the possibility that they could hire me for, like, on a retainer for additional consultation or coaching thereafter. Um, does Let me know if there's more that you would like me to address with that. Um, yeah, I hope that answers at least part of the question. But yeah, again, categorization and flow are very, very conceptual levels, conceptual types of editing. However, this is also the point in editing where you are going to start distinguishing yourself as an editor from everybody else. The kinds of considerations that you bring to categorization and that you use to shape a book's flow are going to be those things that make you unique as an editor, and potentially better suited to a particular project than any other editor could be. So absolutely be thinking about categorization and flow and the kinds of sense that you would want to be bringing to books, or websites or pamphlets or whatever it is that you go on to edit. There are a lot of you. The last of the tools that I am going to be talking about during this is book mapping. And this is especially for fiction and narrative nonfiction. where the text's flow might be more complex and difficult to outline. However, like having a high level view of the text a la an outline is still absolutely crucial to a successful edit. So, this is a very, very simplified book map. Um, the way that I have organized it here, the first column is the scene, and my notation in that column, the first scene is labeled 1.1, then 1.2, and 2.1. 1.1 means the first scene in chapter 1. 1.2 means the second scene in chapter 1, and 2.1 means the first scene of chapter 2. And then I would, of course, have more scenes as is required here, but that's what I need to uh, show off kind of the intent behind that notation. And so the other columns here are which characters are present in the scene, what their goals are for the scene, like what they want to accomplish through their presence in the scene, and then what the table is calling pivot points, which is like those moments where their goals change, and or how they approach those goals changes, and that all contributes to the pace. And the pace I have a little bit of a system for that I'm going to be sharing with you. Um, so yeah, the pivot points are those moments where the character's goals and motivations change with mid scene, like within the scene, not between scenes. Sometimes I notice motivations changing in between scenes. That's definitely something to address with the author. But for a pace, like to systematize pace, there is a nuance, which is the kind of pivot point where a character's motivations and considerations are changing, but their goals are remaining the same. And then there is a redirect, which is a moment where a character's goals change entirely. Sometimes this is just because like their initial goal has been blocked and they need to do something else first. But it could also mean that their motivations and considerations are changing to the level that they're just trying to do something different now with their participation in the book. And then the last thing is contested action, which are those moments where characters, at least one character, acts at cross purposes to each other, and generally is trying to get something out of the scene that uh, where it's not necessarily possible for both of them and a different character to be successful in the same scene. And in those moments, in these contested actions, characters are often required to focus and to improvise to accomplish their goals, which means that there are often a lot of nuances and redirects within a single scene. And pacing, of course, it does change based on the intent of the book. Sometimes there's going to be something that is meant to be more contemplative and meant to be more meditative and slow, and that is necessary to accomplish what the author wants to accomplish. And in those cases, you would want to see a lot more nuances than redirects or contested actions. However, if you have something that has more of a thriller style pace, where it's meant to be moving very quickly, then you would want a lot more redirects and contested actions than nuances. And in the pace column, I am literally just counting up how many nuances, redirects, and contested actions there are. And so one entry in a pace column might be one nuance, four redirects, and one contested action, as an example. Um, so that would be a very, very intensive scene. But I generally find that pivot points are the only thing that contributes to a pace. If there is a situation where a character has a goal and the entirety of the book is them just slowly accomplishing the tasks required to meet that goal, that is a book that it feels like nothing is happening because it is very, very direct. It is the adaptation to situations that creates the sense of pace to me.
Hey,
And
Molly,
so, yeah, go ahead.
we've got another question.
Mhm.
What's the difference between developmental, structural, and content editing?
A lot of it comes down to the editor. Like, what is it that you want to call these things? A lot of the times, like, I generally consider myself a developmental editor. And that, I guess the way that I think of that is that I am in very close conversation with the artistic spirit of the piece and with the uh like with all of those like very background considerations that an author may have. With something that is more of a pure structural edit, then it might be a little bit less emotionally involved, but perhaps more intellectually involved if it is like an academic piece that you're editing. Um, and then content editing, like these are not standardized terms, is really like I'm kind of making an attempt to give an answer here, but they are very much not standardized whatsoever. So I would treat them in general as relatively interchangeable. Personally, um, I don't think that I'm going to be able to give you a satisfying answer for that. Sorry. Um, so if there is are specifics to that, then please do ask a follow-up question. But again, this is a like getting back to the book map. This is a very abbreviated book map. The ones that I use have a lot more columns to them, and so if you are working within fiction, think about what is missing here. Like this doesn't address setting and world building whatsoever. It doesn't address like tone, mood, themes, or anything like that at all within this book map. So as you are developing your own book mapping practice and your own editing practice, think about how you would expand on this and what kinds of things you would want to add to it, and whether or not you would want to try to systematize those things. Um, so these are all of the tools that I use for my practice. Then there's also the things that I go on to hand my clients. I do not generally hand them the book map. That is often has a lot of like reader reactions that might not be so helpful for them to see. Then the first of the deliverables is a revision letter. And this is a zoomed out summary and overview of the structural issues that are found in the manuscript. Usually it's around 10 or 20 pages in length. And usually it is organized into sections. And these sections can be major structural components and elements of writing, or they can be themes that cross multiple elements. So some examples of the sections that I include in my revision letters are characterization, challenge and conflict, also known as plot, intimacy arcs, sometimes simplified as romance arc. And then there's pacing, world building, setting and sensorium, themes, voice and style, tone and mood, sensitivity, and then catch-alls like miscellaneous strengths and miscellaneous areas needing improvement. Each of these could have some reflection in your book map if you so chose. Um, but when you are talking about these in the revision letter, uh, bring up specifics of how they uh, bring up specifics about how any issue actually shows up in the text, and be specific about where those examples are drawn from. For example, you might say that this shows up in scenes 6.4, 7.3, and 8.9. Or you could give like page numbers from the Word document or whatever draft it is that the client sent to you. And always be constructive with your feedback. An author should never leave your edit thinking just that their text has a lot of problems. You should always be leaving them with the thought like, okay, these are the issues that have been like raised, but also here are the things that I can do about them. That like last thing, the sense of being able to do something about it, is always what creates the energy for revision. And so, like, being specific about the ways that you would address something in a text is required for the text to actually move forward towards publication. Um, and so, like, be positive, be specific about what can be done. And if you uh, yeah, be specific about what can be done. The general idea for a revision letter is to give the author and expert readers impressions of the text, as well as some direction with how to address any of the issues that you end up raising. Um, Even if they disagree with you, having a suggestion will help them to springboard off into something that is better for their intent. Um, I generally aim to be at around like 95% agreement. But having somebody be like, oh, no, I see what you're going for there, but this is a much better idea, or this feels better for my manuscript, I still count that as a win, personally. I have a lot
We
of
have a couple
wins.
questions more.
Great.
Sorry. We have some more questions.
Mhm.
Two questions right now. So, first question, I may have missed this, but how do you break up the manuscript into scenes? Is this something you do, or does the authors do this for you?
So the generally the author does this for me. What I count as a scene break is just white space in between the text. So if there is like a paragraph break, that's not a scene break. But if there is like a paragraph and then some like white space and then new text starts, that is what I am counting as a scene break.
Okay. And the second question, how do you practice author care? What kind of emotional responses have you experienced from clients, and how do you manage feelings, especially given, as you mentioned earlier, the intimacy of the work?
Okay. So that is something that I address in a couple of slides, but generally what I am doing to manage author care is I am going to be like trying to show that I understand what it is that they're trying to do. Like there is a significant amount of my editing letter that is devoted to like, here's how I am reading the piece. These are the themes that I am pulling out, and generally showing that I am engaging deeply with the work. And through deep engagement, I am showing that I care about the work. Um, and then the constructive criticism is very much a big thing. Like they wouldn't be coming to me as, I mean, as a freelancer, especially, if they did not also, if they weren't aware that there was something to edit. And so being like raising issues is general has never really been a problem. Raising specific issues maybe, but being constructive, giving them a direction, uh, that direction is usually what they're coming to an editor for. So that is very, very helpful. But also, as I'm going to show in a couple of slides, I give a whole lot of positive feedback during every single edit that I do. Somewhere between like 25 and 60% of my comments in a manuscript are generally just like, hey, this is great. I'm enjoying this. Or like, I see the craft that you were putting into this and I think that it's impressive. Notes like that go a long way um, to help to manage an author's emotions. And then the rest of it is kind of in the post-edit consultations that I mentioned earlier, where I would be talking directly with an author, and if what they need during those moments is like reassurance and emotional care, then that's what they need in those moments. That is not a problem to me at all.
And
So,
another question?
okay, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. Oh, two questions again. First one, have you ever changed your rate midway through a project on finding out it's more complex, sensitive, disorganized than you thought or seen previously? Or do you always view the manuscript before signing a contract and make your decision then?
Uh, That is something that I do hear about periodically. It is not something that I have personally encountered, where something is in significantly worse shape than I uh, believed it to be. There are some times where a client has turned out to be more of a problem client than I anticipated. Um, and that is usually something that I address going forward. Like I'll put out whatever fires I need to put out based on um, what I'm encountering, but I try and learn from it, and figure out like what do I need to be looking for during a sample edit, during an intake questionnaire, and how do I address this so that it doesn't come up again in the future. So the needing to change my rates mid-project, not something that I have experience with. But so I guess I should leave it to other editors. Uh, Other editors who are here, if you have experience with this kind of thing, toss it in chat.
And while we wait for that, do you want to answer the next question?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you navigate ethics and best practices when it comes to editing, especially when it comes to work regarding historically marginalized voices?
That is something that I address with the intake questionnaire, and then also through through the revision letter, through and the other deliverables that I give to somebody. Sensitivity is one of the things that I just kind of include as a standard for the edits that I provide. Um, the ethics and best practices, I think that I would like to get to that later in the presentation. I do address that explicitly during the like bits of the work around the work section.
Right. And we have two people talking about the previous question. Victoria says, I've never changed my fee mid-game. I may regret my fee, but live and learn. And
Mhm.
Anna says, I have a stated policy not to change my rates. I always insist on seeing the manuscript before accepting a job. I think if my estimate is off after I've seen the manuscript, that's on me, not the client.
Mhm. Mhm. Those make sense to me, and I hope that they help to address the concern.
Okay,
I
that's all we've got right now.
That's all we've gotten right now. Okay, great. Second thing, the second deliverable is an editing plan. And this is something that I give to authors because organizing revisions is hard. Um, and one of the ways that it can be hard is an excess of enthusiasm on the author's part. I remember one client that I had who, in response to my feedback, just started creating notes documents with all of the things that they intended to change during their next draft. But there was no organization to it. And eventually the document got so big and unwieldy that they couldn't find what they wanted to, well, like what their intention was, what the notes that they had for themselves were. And they abandoned that document entirely to start to create a new one. And then the same thing happened, and they got to a third document before we talked again, and I was like, okay, I need to actually help you to organize your revision. Um, and so this is something that now I give to all of my clients. An editing plan is a medium Zoom tool to help authors conceptualize and organize what they want to do in response to your feedback. And again, it is a table here. I want you to know that I do almost all of my editing in Microsoft Excel because it is so useful for these kinds of grids. And again, I am using the same notation as in the book map for the scenes. Then the next column is the first sentence, and literally that is just like me copying and pasting the first sentence into this column. How that is useful is so that the authors can copy and paste it and jump straight to the place that they want to be working on next. And then from there, I'm also going to be including what changes they should make and the reasons for those changes. Um, and so the idea there is not only to suggest scene level changes rather than overall discussions of issues, but also to let authors know how they can evaluate whether they should accept those changes. Sometimes they might reject the change but agree with the reason, and so would then need to know that they can edit the editing plan to come up with something that is more appropriate to them. Uh, and also, like sometimes they would not accept the changes until they saw the specifics of the issue being addressed. So on both sides, it is helpful to have both what changes you were recommending and also why. And so, more than this, it may also be helpful to recommend that authors organize their revisions into multiple passes, sometimes just for pacing and plot, then another revision pass for world building and setting, another for dialogue, maybe another one specifically for sensorium. The idea there being that letting them focus will help them to create better quality revisions and also faster. I have not been able to measure this, but I have a sneaking suspicion that breaking things into multiple revision passes will not only create more focused and higher quality revisions, but that they'll be able to do it faster because they're not having to switch between tasks with one big all-encompassing revision. So that's my theory. Have not been able to measure it, but that's the idea. And then the last of the deliverables is inline comments. And I'm going to lead with saying that for me, this is an add-on service. I do not always provide inline comments, and when an author wants them, they have to pay a little bit of an extra per word. And an inline comment is zoomed in text level feedback, and it generally focuses on moment to moment elements that it's not really feasible to include in the revision letter or in the editing plan.
We've got a quick question about that.
Uh-huh.
Do you mean your notes in Excel or the actual manuscript? How?
On good question on the actual manuscript. And so both Word and also this is a screen grab from LibreOffice. Both Word and LibreOffice, and also I believe most other word processors have the ability to add comments to text. Like if you highlight it and then I believe the Word keyboard shortcut is Control Alt M. I think that I've assigned it to Control Alt C in LibreOffice. Um, Once you do that, then you can add these comments, just fill in with general notes without actually touching the language on the page. And so I find that I might not touch the language on the page at all during a structural edit. I might be working specifically with inline comments, editing plan, and revision letter, and not be making deletions and additions myself. Sometimes I do, depends on the project. But these inline comments do cover specifics of character plot and world building, especially with respect to continuity. I find that I do a lot to address continuity with these kinds of inline comments. And yeah, it's very, very fine grained, very detail leveled, might address issues of things like character motivation as they show up within a specific phrase within a specific sentence, like not even addressing the full sentence, but still addressing structural and developmental style issues during at that smaller level. And as you'd see here, this is where I'm getting that 60% from. 3 of my 5 notes here are specific to just praise and positive feedback. And this is important not only, as mentioned before, to create the feeling of being energized to go into revisions, but also so that the author knows what they did right. This kind of positive feedback helps them to know what to keep in the next draft so that they are not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And so absolutely add a well done or a beautiful insight here. They go a long way. They're very, very helpful to the authors. Authors also specifically often want like genuine reader response, and the genuine reader response for something negative is an edit. The genuine reader response for something positive is praise. Very, very quick and dirty outline there. Cool, cool. So that is the editing work. Those are my tools and deliverables for these fiction edits. Then there's more about like the job itself, which is a social activity. At the very least, you're going to be talking to somebody, receiving their manuscript, handing back your edits, and then probably talking to them again. So there is a lot of like work around the work that needs to happen. And part of that is finding work, which very apologetic here. This is an entire subgenre of professional development webinar. I can't give a full answer here. If you want a like deep and detailed discussion, I recommend the Editors Canada webinar archives. They're great. But the basics that I will cover here are that it's the first step is always to identify who you want to work for, such as horror and science fiction novelists, and then cultivate an air of proficiency and be present where your clients or prospective clients are going to hang out. However, avoid giving an unsolicited hard sell. It is a lot easier to develop lasting client relationships if they are seeing you as a fellow professional and as somebody who is like generally good to hang around, rather than as somebody who is like going for a sale, um, in my experience. The last part of this is to be open to non-prestige work. I've been talking a lot about my freelance work. However, I am also a like day job editor, and I edit um, responses to complaints in a unionized environment. Like I work in a complaints department, which is not glamorous. It is often extremely repetitive, but it does pay the bills and it also provides benefits. So like I think it is great. I will probably be staying around with them for at least as long as my transition. But it is non-prestige work. It is not the work that I care the most about, but it is absolutely crucial to me and my career as an editor. And then on the subject of being good to work with, remember always that, as discussed at the top of the webinar, your first job is not to be right, but it is to understand where it is that your clients are coming from. And part of that understanding is understanding that people don't really commit a lot of work to develop something that they find boring and unimportant. So one of the things that you need to understand is, while you're working, is how to find their interest in the manuscript, how to see what they find important, and to reflect that importance in the way that you interact with the text and with them. But also remember that, especially with personal writing, fiction and narrative nonfiction, a lot of people are going to be writing to process their own pain. And so it's very important to treat written traumas with respect, even if you do not know that they are the author's traumas specifically. They might be the traumas from the author's community, but they almost certainly are going to be some of the reader's traumas. And so, like, treating all of them with respect is of paramount importance. And also remember that feeling sad about something makes a distinction between the person who is feeling sad and whatever it is that they are feeling sad about. And this is going to sound extremely glib, but I'm going to expand on it. Try to care instead of feeling sorry. And what I mean about that is think about, what do you do when somebody that you care about is hurting? That's not a rhetorical question. Reflect on that. Think about what you have done when somebody that you care about is hurting, and then do it for your clients. However, it's very, very important to respect the boundaries that people put up around their pain. If you notice such a boundary, do not cross it. It is a terrible, terrible idea to do so, especially as a professional. But going further in that same direction, as a freelancer, you don't necessarily know who else is going to be working on a book. You might know exactly who's going to be working on a book if you're working in-house. But as freelancers, especially, you can't assume that the author is also going to be hiring a sensitivity or an authenticity reader. And the structural editing stage, or developmental or content, is the best stage to be looking at the text, how the text fits into cultural conversations. Which means that we as structural editors have a duty to address issues of conscious and unconscious bigoted writing when we encounter them. And sort of the best practices that I was thinking about are, first, that we need to not edit to condemn. We are here to be helping the people that we are working with. And so for professional relations at the very least, but also like so that our clients are going to be more willing to work on the suggestions that we provide, it's best to assume positive intent until you are shown otherwise. However, also remember that people generally write their worldview. Um, so like if you see a racist comment that is not being challenged in one place and then in another place and another place and another place, that is not for isolated and disconnected like racist comments. That is a pattern. And it is to the reader's interest, at the very least, possibly also to the author's interest, to point out those patterns and to say, like, hey, this is a like doing work in our culture that is harmful to the people in the culture. And because the people are more important than the culture, it is going to be best to address these things. And again, be constructive. Be like, this is a participating in this harmful narrative, and this would be a better direction to take this narrative. And maybe that is just adding challenge to the writing, like saying, like, okay, this is a racist comment right here. Let's show how it hurts. Let's show the ways that it is damaging not only to the people that it is directed against, but also to the ability of the person speaking to relate to anybody. Um, and if we have time for it, I will get further into that. So this is the little section that I had on best comment or best practices um, for like working on sensitivity and authenticity concerns. If there is more that you would like me to speak to, please do submit another Q&A question. But working on continuing on for now. The last thing within this section is that like when sometimes like there is that pattern, sometimes there are just absolute jerks that we would be working with. And within horror, I tend to call them shock jocks. And horror to me is a genre of healing. There is another whole webinar that I have, like an intro to editing horror, where I get into that much more deeply. But in general, a lot of writing, especially like the writing that is most worth working on, is writing that is meant to heal. That people are trying to deal with traumas, they're trying to deal with societal issues, and to improve society, improve their own lives through sharing their perspective. However, other people are writing to like reinvest in traumas. They're trying to reinvest and like double down on there being a specific way that the world has to work, which is like, that's just the way the world works, is something that I have heard a lot from people who are acting in bigoted ways. And so they are inflicting, with their writing, they are inflicting the kinds of trauma that other people write to heal. And so even if this compulsion comes from cycles of trauma, which it may, you don't know where these clients are coming from when they are being bigots. It's not necessarily on you to fix them, and it is often a very, very bad idea to try. So I generally prefer just not to work with them. And so there are a number of screening techniques that are available to you. There is an intake questionnaire, such as the the ones that I sort of demonstrated earlier. Then there's also sample edits. And I know of some editors as well who will do phone consultations and just like straight like talk with their prospective clients over the phone. Using at least one of these, I think, is absolutely crucial. Using two of them would be better. But whenever you are using them, like in an intake questionnaire, in a sample edit, like do all of the things that you would be doing normally, like attend to the craft of whatever piece it is that's in front of you, and like try and gain that access to intent, try and get the sense of who the author is, but also look out for vectors of harm. And generally, I find that it is a very bad idea to sign a contract with somebody whose creative vision centers on boundary violation. That the kinds within horror, I occasionally will come across somebody who says something like, you know, why do I need to include content warnings? This is horror. what they are saying when they say that is that it is absolutely crucial to them to try and like shock people to bring them to the edges of their boundaries and potentially to trigger them. Like they think that that is what the genre is for, which again, my other webinar, it's not. But that is what they think it is. And that kind of intent to cross boundaries is also going to be reflected in how they treat things like payment deadlines. A payment deadline is a boundary. And if somebody is like putting that in the core of how they interact with art and people, then they might are well, they're more likely to also make you chase them for payments, and you might find yourself needing to even go so far as to small claims court or something to like actually get paid for the work that you did. So again, like do your best not to work with like jerks. Cool. So I mentioned at the top of the webinar that this was going to also include mind reading, and how that is, and like that being a different way to access authorial intent. And so this is absolutely part of the webinar. This is absolutely something that I do, but I'm not doing it as like a mentalist. I'm not doing it as like some con artist or whatever. I am using an understanding of the structures of thought and emotion to do deeper reads on the text, as well as to try and better understand the ways that the author and the audience are going to be thinking during while writing or reading this piece. And so I'm going to be drawing from two different academic disciplines here. The first is phenomenology, which is the philosophy of internal structures of experience. And I'm going to be drawing primarily from Martin Heidegger here, who be careful with Martin Heidegger. His philosophy is very, very important. It is like very insightful. It is a great way to understand the structures of thought and emotion without necessarily needing to get a degree in psychology. However, Martin Heidegger was also a true believer in the Nazi movement. He was not a good person. Um, and so if you choose to do some independent study and read Being in Time, great. It's like fascinating reading. However, I'm very strongly recommend to be at the very least careful, if not completely dismissive, of his treatment of death and authenticity. I'm not going to be talking about them in this or any webinar, but that's where I believe the seeds of fascist thought are in Being in Time. And please do be careful lest you bring them forward into, bring those kinds of seeds forward into your own thinking and how you interact with the world. The other side of this is affect theory, which is the anthropology of external structures of experience. By contrast with Martin Heidegger, Sarah Ahmed, super great. Love her entire bibliography. Cannot recommend her works highly enough, especially the cultural politics of emotion, which is primarily what I'm going to be drawing from here. So before I get further into this, this is my academic background. This is my specialization, and it is core to how I interact with authors, with texts, and also like how I try to represent readers as an editor. Um, you are going to have your own specializations. And as I'm going through this, I want you to be thinking about uh, how you are, like, how you're going to be able to specialize, like, bring your other specialties into editing, because it is the kind of thing that does demand you as a person rather than you as an editor. Like, the more of the fullness of yourself you can bring into it, the better you're going to do. So starting with phenomenology, the most important thing that I believe phenomenology has to offer is that consciousness is imagination. There is no difference between those two things. The stuff of consciousness is the stuff of imagination. The activity of consciousness is imagining things. And I really want to emphasize that imagination is not just the passive capacity to imagine things, it is the activity of doing so. And so when we are imagining things, we are connecting things, objects, attributes, people, stuff in our minds, and we use those connections to imagine what we can do with the things that we have connected. The simpler name for things, objects, attributes, people, and stuff is entities. And so you would see that word a lot in phenomenology. And there are a few pertinent visual metaphors for imagination, the chief of which to me is lightning. This sort of meandering, high energy and fast connection between multiple points. Then there's also cobwebs, rhizomes, and networks. Each of them, I think, is a good visual representation of the structure of our minds, of these like kinds of connections that we are drawing between entities. And the next, like, because we are using these connections to imagine what we can do with things that we are connecting, experience itself is about doing things, which is to say that like doing, also known as like if you're a philosophy buff yourself, like ethics, epistemology, and ontology, ethics, doing is the main way that we experience the world. And then things like being and knowing, ontology and epistemology, are derived from doing. They are built out of doing. And doing things itself is about caring. And and like in this world that we are creating through these connections that we make in our minds, everything is connecting to everything else. Like the stuff of the substance of these connections that we make is care. And when I say caring, I mean creating, revealing, and activating possibilities, meanings, and projects. And so, like, uh, as this care sort of clusters around an entity, and an entity comes to represent all kinds of caring, then its essence is this concentration of meaning and possibility that gets embedded in it, which is to say that essence, like being, is condensed doing. All of the ways that something can do, all the ways that it can mean, all the ways that it can signify is what it is, at least within our minds. And so the essence of who you are is like your personhood is the synergistic totality, also known as the Gestalt. Vibe is another good synonym. So you are the vibe of all the ways that you relate to the things around you and how you relate them to each other. Simpler version is that you are what you care about and you are how you care about those things. And that is, I believe, a very, very crucial point. And so I'll be using that later on with some later slides. Um, as I am going forward, though, I am wondering how we are doing on time. Um, how much more time do we have?
So it is 8:13 now. Sorry,
Okay.
I didn't want to interrupt your
Okay.
presentation.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so if you could try to
Very,
wrap
very
things up.
fast.
Yes.
Okay. So, in the activity of the imagination, the natures of all entities is essentially the same. A television is the same kind of thing as the color blue, is the same kind of thing as the rising cost of housing, is the same kind of thing as my spouse. All of them are entities that can be connected to each other to accomplish tasks. And I referenced meaning earlier on the previous slide. The way that I understand meaning is as the capacity to affect action. So something is meaningful when it can be used to change the world. Maybe just as a concept, but just generally. And knowledge about something is always how to knowledge. When we know something about something, we know how to relate it to something else to accomplish a possible task. And even something as simple as knowing how somebody's hair looks means knowing how to look at their hair. And that can be like built into more advanced knowledge, like how I would look at their hair in a different light, what their hair would look like in a different light, what it would look like with a different length, with a different style, and then how to create that different style, how to like uh, build into cosmetology. That is all built off of these very, very small pieces of knowing. And I think one of the more important points is that thought and emotion are the same kind of thing because both of them are the imagination drawing logical connections between entities in the world. And emotions do have a very logical structure to them. Uh, there is a breakdown of fear that is in being in time that is very, very useful. So we experience fear when some entity approaches that may or may not negatively affect or involve itself with something that we care about. When all of those things are present and can be related to each other, then the feeling of fear can emerge. It is extremely logical. Like these are things that are like present in my mind, and I am relating them to each other, but we experience it as a feeling. Because we are what matters to us, we are what we care about. The thing that is being like by threatening what matters to us, the fearsome entity also threatens us. And in that fearing moment, what we are afraid of is our relationship to and our involvement with the entity that matters to us, the thing that is being threatened. And so when I am thinking, for example, of like um, I don't know, I'm about to receive an injury. What I'm thinking is like, it's really going to hurt when I receive this injury. Like, if my arm is about to get cut, that is going to cause me pain. That is a thought about the relationship between me and my arm. Or I might be thinking, like, oh no, I was going to use that arm tomorrow, and be thinking about the relationship between me and my arm in that very utilitarian sense rather than something that is more direct, like the pain. But both of those are thoughts about the relationship with the entity that matters to us. And so the feeling of fear brings our cares to mind. And our relationships and involvements create texture for every single emotional encounter, as does the nature of the things that we encounter. We never just feel fear, and we never feel it the same way twice because of like our life context, what relationships are present, the things that we have been doing recently. All of those create additional texture over and above the fear, so that it's not just feeling fear. Um, and there are limits to the kinds of things that we can think. And what I mean by that is what is possible for us to think is basically whether or not the thing that we would be thinking about can be related into this web of lightning that we have for our minds. Like if it is can be embedded into that network of other thoughts and connections and imagination drawings, then it is something that can be thought. But anything that can't be integrated into that is literally unthinkable. We cannot conceive of it. However, the unthinkable can still happen, and it can potentially insist on itself. And what that feels like, something unthinkable happening, and then not being able to dismiss it from your mind, like being fixated on it or focused on it, or like just generally like ruminating on it. If it is unthinkable and still doing that, that is very similar to the experience of trauma, I believe. That's my little addition to Heidegger here. So I think in the interest of time, this I'm going to skip over affect theory so that we can have like any Q&A. It is going to be in the slides that you're going to be sent after this webinar. I also have a whole other presentation that focuses exclusively on phenomenology and affect theory and how they relate to editing. But for now, I am going to just say that phenomenology helps us to read deeper into intent, both the author's intent and the reader's intent. And affect theory helps us to anticipate how a text is going to enter into, contribute to, or disrupt relevant cultural conversations and sensitivity concerns. And I hope that this has been at least a little bit interesting, because that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for all of the questions that you have submitted. This is a great time for additional questions.
Okay, I've got quite a few questions.
Okay.
So I'm going to start with there's a couple questions in the chat and a couple of comments also. Um,
Mhm.
okay, so Cameron has two questions.
Mhm.
One, I'm currently working with an author to whom I provided a number of observations, including about texts not clearly relevant to the subject of her memoir. She explained the basis for their inclusion, but not persuasively. And going back to your opening points, she couldn't tell me the through line points of her book. Shall I just proceed to follow my editorial lights with queries both in the text and in the editorial comments when I return it?
I
So that's
think,
the first question. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, following your editorial light is kind of the only thing that you really can do. I because it seems like they are very important to her, it does strike me immediately as a possibility that this might be something that she is writing in part to do her own processing. And that is tricky and thorny to deal with. Um, which, given that you like are in the middle of a project for this, I would recommend that you take extra care with your reasoning here. Like, don't be dismissive of the emotional content or like any of the content that she's written that isn't necessarily so related to the piece. Uh, like, be respectful of that, but also like be clear about why this doesn't belong, or what you think the text is about, and why uh, you think that your editorial through line should be the basis for any revisions. She is going to be free to reject your suggestions afterwards. Like, you can't make her do anything that she doesn't want to do, and shouldn't try. But um, providing her with a clear and cohesive like editorial vision is going to be helpful to her to create her own clear and coherent authorial vision. And so, like, even if she doesn't follow your recommendations, she should be able to better articulate to herself what she is doing and why, if you follow your editorial light as best as you can.
Okay. And this her second question, your Cameron's second question. In practical terms, I use Word's track changes feature for copy editing, but the marking of particular changes is lost when a section is relocated. Do you have suggestions to ensure that marked changes remain evident in relocated text?
The Unfortunately, this is the kind of thing that does sometimes require a lot of redoing of work. If you move the text first, then you can edit it and the track change, like the changes will then be tracked. But I don't know how to have track changes show up if you do it in a different order than that. Maybe some other people in chat might be able to make some recommendations.
So Rob did say, to your second point, I have turned revision marks off, moved the paragraph, and turned revision marks back on. I'll add a comment in the margin indicating I've moved the paragraph. This preserves the copy edits.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, also comment. Oh, I've got another. Okay, so someone had a comment about the fees. I've had a project that was less coherent than the sample chapter suggested. However, because the structural edit is really a process of meeting the author and manuscript where they're at, it didn't really make me regret what I quoted. It was still a rewarding process for both the author and me. My contracts are for a set number of editing rounds, so it wasn't exactly more work, just work at an earlier stage of the editing process than expected.
Okay, so to address that, like that is the kind of thing where like it is very common for somebody's early work to be the most polished piece of the work. If you can and are like if you're doing a sample edit, which it's generally best to do a sample edit, it is best to get the full manuscript so that you can sort of randomly select through the manuscript like which chapters you're going to read. I would recommend to read a chapter from the beginning, the middle, and the end of the manuscript to see if there is consistency. And if there is not, then that is the only way that I can really suggest for how to anticipate that kind of drop in quality prior to actually beginning. Authors might not always be willing to share the entire manuscript when, like, for a sample edit, but if they do, then that is the point that you would like have that opportunity.
Okay, another question. How do you avoid going into another type of editing? For example, maybe you are reading a manuscript and you have a suggestion to make, can also be considered line editing.
Well, I think like the edit itself is more important than the name that we assign it. Like giving the edit is more important than calling it a structural edit. Uh, I This is like something that is thorny and fuzzy for most editors. I think you're not alone in that. Um, so like I keep my attention generally on the structural side of things just through practice. Like it is easier to do that because I've done it a lot. But th- adding line edits especially if they attend to a structural issue isn't necessarily a problem so long as for the most part you can keep your focus on the structural side of things. And it is very common for an edit to attend to both structural and line level issues at the same time. It is very common to mix line editing with either structural editing or copy editing. That's something that you'll hear a lot. So knowing that you're going to do that can help you to better price your services. Like think about your propensity to do that. But if you just want to focus more on the structural side of things, then like do remember that some of your structural edits are going to require significant rewriting on the part of the author. And in that sense, it can be wasteful to provide those line level edits because uh, A, the author isn't necessarily going to be keeping that wording in the first place, and B, it might confuse the edit because, like, say you are saying like this whole thing will need to be rewritten, and then you provide some like because of this structural issue, and then you provide some line level editing. Like that can be wasteful. It can be difficult for the authors and their time, um, and confuse the edit. But it is still like if the is not going to require extensive rewriting, then that's not necessarily a problem so long as overall you are keeping your focus and you will be able to keep your focus better as you perform more edits.
You ready for the next question?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think are the specific abilities and talents that make a person a good structural editor?
That is interesting. Um, so on the fiction side of it, I think that it can be very, very helpful to have a strong creative drive yourself. Um, Having that kind of drive, like authors aren't just coming to us for editing. They are coming to us for our perspectives. And embracing the perspective that you would bring to something is part of being a good structural editor. And so, like, if you should not be overriding somebody's like your client's artistic vision with your own. It should only like you should only be providing those kinds of um, that kind of feedback as a way of complementing or augmenting their like what it is that they are trying to do. um, but having the ability to draw between many different potentially disconnected areas of a piece of writing and then coalesce all of those connections into an editorial vision, I believe is the main uh, the main skill that we have as structural editors. Um, as hopefully I have illustrated through the entire preceding webinar. Um, but I think generally the core skill of structural editing, I believe, is the categorization and flow that I mentioned in the tools. So if you feel that you have facility with that, then that I think is where you would be building from in the first place. So if you feel comfortable and like working with categorization and flow, then that comfort and that enjoyment is what's going to develop into strong structural edits.
Okay, the next question. What do you base your rate on? Word count primarily, plus add-ons like comments? Anything else?
Yeah, I do a per word rate. In the past, I have done per project rates, and that is um, more of an art, I think, and also take like makes me do a lot of extra work prior to potentially signing a contract. Um, I know a lot of people who do like project based rates, and that it works for them, and so like great, it works for you. Um, but basically, because I am uh, both doing in-house editing through this complaints department and also doing freelancing. Um, what I am basing my rates on is largely like what I want to do for fun, how expensive the things I want to do for fun are. If I were only freelancing, I would be basing my rates on how much money do I need to make and how many projects do I expect to take on, and then deriving from like going from what I need to make and then maybe what I want to make, and then going from that to like what my rates need to be and how much time I need to spend marketing. Um, so uh, a decent starting place is the rates chart for the Editorial Freelancers Association. If you go to the Editorial Freelancers Association's website, then you can find their rates chart. I'm not sure how updated that is. It's been a while since I checked it. I don't know how recent it is. It might be like a 2022 thing, so potentially quite accurate. But that would be a starting place, and that is also letting somebody else set your rates for you. In general, it will be better for you to be like, what do I need to make? What do I want to make? And what rates do I need to set to accomplish one or both of those goals? And for me, it is like an add-on to this base salary that I am making, and so I am maybe a little bit looser with my rates. But it is per word, and it is a different per word rate depending on whether they do or do not want comments. For the query package critique, I also have a flat rate and then a different flat rate for comments. And that's all on my website at horroreditor.com. You can see exactly what my rates are. I don't include a calculator for them, but there are, like, we all carry calculators around in our pockets these days.
Okay, next question. How do you do a sample edit for a structural edit?
Ooh, good, very, very good question. So this is like the best structural edits are going to be keeping the entire book in mind at once. There is no avoiding that. And so like a sample edit is necessarily not going to attend to the full breadth of structure that you're going to be encountering with a piece. However, um, you can still learn to identify a lot of structural issues uh, within the first pages of something. And so you would be looking for elements of craft, for like, again, for me, fiction craft, but generally you can be looking for those kinds of elements within the first pages and then flag them and make suggestions um, for how you would address them. If you need help with learning to identify those things. I cannot strongly enough recommend just reading a whole bunch of things. My experience with like how I learned to identify a lot of problems on the first pages is that I volunteered as a slush reader for a romance publisher. And so, like, making my evaluations often not based on the entirety of the manuscript for whether or not to recommend publication. And reading, a few of these novels a week let me start to see a lot more of the structural issues in the very, very early pages. If you don't want to do that, then just reading a whole bunch and maybe just like going through a bookstore for a few weeks and picking out books and just reading the first 5 pages and get seeing what you can find in those first 5 pages uh, will help you to notice the kinds of issues that do arise in the first 5 pages of a sample edit, for example, and be able to make recommendations within that sample.
Okay. Next question. How has AI affected your work? Have you encountered AI in your work with authors?
I'm really, really bad with this. Like straight up, I have not yet learned to identify a lot of AI things. I do ask in my intake questionnaire if the author has used AI for any portion of the work, and when they say yes, I do not sign contracts with them. I personally refuse to work on it. Um, but I do have a lot of trouble identifying things when it has not been like brought up to me, unless the AI is like hallucinating and making a whole bunch of unconnected statements, and then I can sniff things out. But generally, my practice is to refuse to work on AI generated works. And so I do ask authors if there is AI as a portion of their writing. Um, and I guess that's about the extent of things for me. Other people in chat, if you want to talk about AI, feel free. I believe that there are additional AI webinars that are available through Editors Canada, including potentially some that are coming up soon. I don't remember off the top of my head what they would be.
Okay. Another question. How do you avoid going into another type of editing? For example, maybe you are reading a manuscript and you have a suggestion to make, can also be considered line editing. I believe you already answered that question.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So I'll go to the next question. Follow-up question to how to do a sample edit for a structural edit. Do you
Mhm.
present the sample edit? I know I break down chapters as part of my section of a dev edit, but there is much more included.
What do you mean, do I present the sample edit?
How do you present the sample edit?
Oh, how do I present the sample edit? Because a sample edit is, and like I'm not taking a full look at the piece, I would generally not include either a revision letter or an editing plan for it. My sample edits are exclusively in inline comments, like using the comment feature on Word or LibreOffice. Um, and yeah, so like I basically am just calling out those fine grain level shots when I see them, and sometimes those comments will get pretty long when I am identifying something, especially that I believe will present an issue throughout the piece. Like if the main character is not presented, like if there is a clear main character within the sample edit and they don't make any interesting choices within the scene. But the most recent sample edit that I did actually, the main character made an interesting choice before the scene started. And so, like, it was a flashback to, like, there was something kind of like a flashback or an allusion to them making an interesting choice. But they did not actually make an interesting choice during the scene. And so I started talking about character motivation and um, other things like that. I'm not necessarily the most time efficient with my sample edits, but I do try to provide as much like value as I can to the authors during them. Uh, in part because I want to show the value that I would be adding through the larger edit.
Okay, we've got one more question.
Mhm.
What are some of your favorite horror or sci-fi novels?
Love this question. Thank you. So, recent favorite horror novel is Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. It is a book that is sort of riffing off of The Haunting of Hill House a little bit, which is another favorite. My like graduating thesis was on Shirley Jackson for the most part. But Tell Me I'm Worthless is like riffing off of that a little bit, but talking about how like fascism creeps into our relationships and into our self-conceptions, and using the like metaphor of a haunting of a ghost story to talk about this haunting of ideology. It's really, really fascinating. I love it. It is a great, great book. A more enduring favorite is Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation, which is a like very easy recommendation to make. It's achieved a lot of cultural penetration at this point. But I really like it as an evolution of cosmic horror that it is talking about not only these like cosmic strange creatures, but also like cosmic strange landscape, and then extending that all the way back into cosmic strange protagonists and like them not being able to understand themselves any more than they understand their environment. And so bringing the like horror of incomprehensibility very much home in that sense. I thought and think that it is like a very, very exciting piece of cosmic horror. Really, really good. Um, and let's
Okay.
see here. I read any books? Oh my God. My mind is completely drawing a blank. Uh, uh, Maybe I can let it sit with those two.
Okay. There's also a follow-up question about sample edits.
Mhm.
How much of the text do you do a sample edit on to return to the potential client?
I again with that most recent sample edit, I only did 5 pages of edit or like a thousand words. Um, Left to my own devices, I would probably go with around 2,500 words to get a little bit deeper into it, be able to make a few more connections. Um, but that other client was comparing with other editors that he had approached, and so like they had provided 5 pages, and so I was asked to only provide 5 pages, which is fine. And but generally, like 2,500 words, about 10 pages. That's sort of what I would do. I could also see like 15 pages if you wanted to do what is that, like 3,750 words. Um, that would also be fine. I would probably not go so far as 20 pages, 5,000 words. I think that would be too much, um, and would start to eat into the value that you would provide with a main edit. But I think 5 or 10 pages would be a good amount.
Okay. There's also a couple people who've commented about AI. So you asked if anyone had experience with AI. Someone
Mm-hmm.
said, I'm just starting to use StorySnap.
Hmm.
And someone else said, I wrote up a full AI policy for what I would, but mostly would not edit or do/use from AI for any of my own material and included links to resources for more info.
Great. Yeah, good idea.
And someone else said, I help prepare grant applications, and I would also refuse to work on AI generated or heavily revised materials. My reasoning, in addition to all of the ethical issues, is that my methodology is teaching people how to do grant writing, and using AI tells me the person is looking for shortcuts, and that's not what I would do. I would see it as a red flag for a potential problem client. And by
Yeah.
AI, I mean generative AI, not necessarily grammar checkers, although I a lot of them do use Gen AI now, so it's getting more complicated.
Hmm. Yeah. Uh, it is a really big subject, and um, that is a pretty thorough answer. I thank you for putting that into the chat.
Okay, so it's now quarter to 9, has run longer than expected. But I wanted to make
Fantastic.
I wanted
A
to
lot of
make sure
engagement,
that
though.
you yeah, a lot of great questions, and I wanted to make sure that everyone's question was answered.
Mhm,
Um, so there aren't any more questions right now.
mhm,
Um, so it seems people are just thanking you for the webinar.
mhm.
It was very informative. So thank you.
Oh, good, good. Uh, Glad it landed where I wanted it to. Maybe I should have gone through the affect theory stuff anyway. Maybe I could. Should I like go back and do all of that just so that it's like part of the recording now that it's just us 48 people?
Yeah, you can do that if you want.
Okay, sure. Okay, so the affect theory phenomenology is the inside out approach to feeling, and affect theory is the outside in approach, where it is more on the anthropological side, more on the sociological side. And within affect theory, there are two main kinds of emotional experiences to understand. The first is shared ones, and the second is individual. And by a shared emotional experience, I mean the shared aesthetic experience of being in a crowd at a good concert. Like there's something that passes through the crowd. There's something that like happens in that moment to like unify the crowd and like create this very, very like more than the sum of its parts kind of feeling. However, there's also the individual experience of being the only person nearby who's thrown off by the band's racist lyrics. And so, like, that is an individuating experience. That is the same, like, inputs, but a very different reaction. And so both of these kinds of experiences are going to be affected by our personal and shared histories. And as mentioned in the fear section, like repeated experiences are still going to feel different because of added life context. Like if in like using this same example here, if you were to go to a second concert and like they go through the same set and you were again being thrown off by those same lyrics, the entirety of the concert and also like that section with the racist lyrics is still going to feel different because it's a different day. And you're going to have had different experiences. You're going to have reflected more on the band's potential racism or their confirmed racism in this example here. Um, and so, like, all of that is going to feel different because of your added life context. But I really want to just straight up quote from the cultural politics of emotion here to help add some understanding to that. And that quote is that given that shared feelings are not about feeling the same feeling or feeling in common, it is the objects of emotion that circulate rather than emotion as such. Such objects become sticky or saturated with affect as sites of personal and social tension. My paraphrase of this is that history gets baked into entities, and that history has an emotional valence. And we don't necessarily feel that valence, we don't feel it directly, but we do respond to it. We feel something about it. And that to me is like absolutely like fascinating. And I find that a lot of affect theory tends to study specifics of how history gets baked into entities, what kinds of emotional valence it creates, and what kinds of reactions people can have to them, to those histories and to those entities. So this is like the closest that I have come to an overall like thesis statement for affect theory. It's a really, really interesting field of study. Strongly recommend to pick it up, especially as an editor. but I'm also going to provide a summary of a whole bunch of emotions that Sarah Ahmed discusses. The first, as alluded to before, is sadness in the sense of sad for you, which aligns the person feeling the sadness with somebody else's pain. However, it also maintains a distinction between you and whatever it is that you're feeling sad about. Like you are not adopting the cares for yourself in this kind of sadness, which is similar to pity, um, which is worthwhile. It's like it's a necessary psychic defense to choose what things you care about and how you are going to care about them. But it is definitely worth noting about this kind of sadness. And then there's comfort, which the experience of comfort dissolves our awareness of our bodily limits. And if it has a direction, it is oriented towards stasis or toward the cause of the comfort. So the example that I'll bring here is that I'm in a very, very comfortable chair. And in this moment, like right now, as I'm talking, I am not entirely sure where my butt stops and the chair starts. Like it feels a little bit like my butt is extending through the chair and like the chair is extending into my butt. There's a fuzziness to that border, and that is created by the feeling of comfort. By contrast, pain and discomfort increase our awareness of our bodily limits. And if they have a direction, they are oriented towards creating space between the person feeling the pain and the cause of the pain or the discomfort. And by bodily limits, I do mean like the opposite here. Like if I slap my forearm, I am very aware of where the border is between my hand and my forearm right now, and that awareness of that barrier is created by the pain. Another kind of bodily limit that you can become aware of through pain is like if you're overextending your arm, then I'm not actually still overextending my arm. Don't worry about me, I'm good. But if you are overextending your arm, then you become aware that like I'm not going to be able to maintain this overextension very much, or else like my tendons and ligaments might start to tear. Like they are like I need to like withdraw my arm. I need to stop stretching it so bad. Um, that is a different kind of bodily limit that you can be aware of. For fear, Sarah Ahmed generally agrees with Heidegger. She like uses his breakdown of what it like how fear is created, but also notes that fear constricts bodily space and restricts mobility in social space, which is to say that you tend to shrink in on yourself a little bit and maybe also get isolated while you are afraid. Like fear creates those effects. Then there's disgust, which is about stickiness and blockages. And the feeling of disgust involves a commingled attraction and repulsion that undermines the distinction between you and the thing that you're disgusted by. The example that I'll use here is say that there is a like awful piece of gunk in my sink. Um, and the the thing that makes the gunk disgusting is in part that I kind of want to touch it. And when I'm imagining touching it, I'm imagining like the feeling of touching it. I'm imagining even maybe like the feeling of the texture of that gunk replacing the texture of my skin. Um, if you are familiar with Julia Kristeva's The Power of Horror, Sarah Ahmed's disgust is very similar to Julia Kristeva's Abject. I think that they are approaching the same thing using different methodologies. So the difference between Ahmed's disgust and Kristeva's Abject is not that important to me. I think that like it's pretty much the same. And then there's shame, which is a self-oriented kind of disgust. And when you're feeling ashamed, you're focused on the sensation of your skin. And also, for shame to be possible, it relies on the presence or imagined presence and attractiveness of others before whom you can be ashamed. Like there would need to be other superior people who are judging you in order to for you to feel shame. And they don't necessarily need to exist, but you need to be able to imagine them. And they don't need to be attractive in a physical sense. They can be like intellectually attractive. And in that case, you would be thinking something like, oh no, what I just said was so stupid and they're so smart. Like they're going to see that I am a hack or something like that. And the last of these emotions is bigotry, in this hatred in the sense of bigotry, which depends on a slurring failure to identify clear and distinct other people. And it creates this nebulous and slippery they whose presence is demanded and created through hateful acts and speech acts. Um, which the example here is kind of cartoonish, but think of a person like brandishing a weapon and saying, like, just wait till those people come here and I will show them that they don't belong. It's a like very cartoonish there, but the those people did not exist as a group until this person created them, created that group, and also they are demanding that the hated group, those people, show up for the purpose of having violence enacted on them. And so that's what hatred in the sense of bigotry is. Uh, the slurring failure to identify clear and distinct others is most obvious through speech acts like, oh, you're not really black, or she's just one of the boys. When those kinds of things are being said, like the person who's speaking, like with the "you're not really black" thing, they're saying like blackness is this smear to me. It is like undifferentiated. It is like not really people. It is just like this mass. And you, however, the person who isn't really black, you have emerged from that mass and you have taken on person-like characteristics. So I'm able to identify with you and talk with you like I would talk with a normal person, so that person believes. Up until the point where that person says, "What the hell are you talking about? I'm extremely black. I'm black as hell." Then the person who is like saying that would like start to push them back into the smear. Same thing happens like if you say like, "What are you talking about?" Like girls get dirty too, rather than she's just one of the boys. Then like the she would also get pushed back into this smear of femininity. And so that was all that I really had to say about affect theory. Maybe I could have included it into the mainline presentation, but I hope that helps to demonstrate what I mean about anticipating how it's going to enter into, contribute to, or disrupt cultural conversations and sensitivity concerns. The ways that we use emotion in context help to advance our political priorities. And seeing how emotion is used in a text is going to help us to see how it is going to be participating in larger cultural conversations. So, yeah, I hope that added a little bit for those of you who are still here. Thank you again for attending this presentation and the time that you have given, the attention that you have given, and the questions that you have raised. This has been a lot of fun for me. I hope it has been interesting to and ideally informative to other
Yes,
people as well.
thank you. This was very informative.
Mm.
Okay, I am going to end the recording now.
Okay.